Peter saw something moving in the distance. He knew he had to be careful. Predators had been reported in the area, so he moved closer to see if it was the bear he was looking for. Then something else caught his attention. He saw the black bear, but the bear was carrying a child. Peter turned pale. He had never seen anything like this. He had to make sure the baby was okay, but there was a big problem. The bear refused to let go of the child. Peter decided to take a slow approach. All sorts of questions and concerns came to mind. He had no idea what the bear was doing with the baby. He had no time to waste, but he had to be careful. If the bear got angry, the child could get seriously hurt. Peter decided to take matters into his own hands. He slowly approached the bear from behind. The bear had just placed the boy on the ground. This could be his chance to get the baby to safety. Peter knew things could end badly if he made a wrong move. Then the bear turned around. At first, Peter thought the bear hadn't noticed him, but then he saw its attitude change. That was not good at all. Peter felt his heart bounce in his chest. He had never felt so afraid. Peter had an intense exchange of glances with the bear. Thanks to his experience as a ranger, he knew not to make any sudden movements. He had to remain completely still. One wrong move, and it could have been the end of him. Then the bear reacted. The bear grabbed the boy instead of pouncing on Peter and ran away quickly. Peter tried to see where it was going, but it was too fast. He had to quickly inform his fellow rangers to prepare a rescue team for the boy. But there was a problem. His fellow rangers didn't believe Peter at all. Peter was desperate for help, but he didn't seem to want to give up. He insisted that he had seen the bear with a child. Peter decided to take matters into his own hands. He had to call the police. All his fellow rangers had told him to let it go. They all thought Peter had gone crazy. Peter refused to listen. He had told the police what was going on. The first officers on the scene arrived within minutes. They took Peter's call very seriously. More reinforcements would soon arrive. Then Peter's boss told the police officers to go into his office. When they came out, they ignored Peter and went straight into the woods. More police officers quickly arrived. They told Peter not to move. They looked pretty angry. Peter had no idea what was going on. What had his boss told these officers? When Peter confronted him, he was told to sit down and wait. He would soon be questioned. Peter was confused. The officers returned after a few minutes. Peter was surprised. They certainly hadn't scoured the entire forest in minutes. Something else must have happened. Peter would soon have the answers. Peter was questioned about the bear he had supposedly seen. He was also asked about the baby. Peter knew what he had seen, and no one seemed to take him seriously. He had to get to the bottom of it. The police told Peter that they would be leaving soon, and that they didn't find it funny. Peter burst into tears. Peter had been forbidden to leave the office, but his boss still wanted to talk to him. Because of all the stress he was experiencing, Peter had become very emotional. He burst into tears, asking his boss to go get the boy. But there was something else that would upset Peter even more. Peter had been suspended. His boss told him he could no longer work as a forest ranger. Peter felt the world was against him. His boss and his fellow rangers believed that something really horrible was happening to Peter, that he saw things because of traumatic events in his life. They tried to convince Peter to go to therapy. He had just lost a baby with his wife. For this reason, no one believed him. They thought the trauma was still fresh and that he was imagining a bear with his baby. Peter told them that this was not the case. He had a plan to solve everything on his own. Peter was determined to find out the truth. He was no longer allowed to enter the forest, but he didn't care. The welfare of the child was the only thing on his mind. His wife tried to stop him, but she knew it was useless. Peter went into the forest anyway. Peter decided to go to the forest early in the morning. He knew that at that time, no one would be guarding the edge of the forest, so he could go in without any problems. He only had one more thing to do before he could leave. He went to see his best friend, Jacob, a fellow ranger. Jacob was surprised to see Peter. He had heard what had happened. Peter explained the whole story to him. They had to get to the forest to save the boy. Jacob was skeptical. He didn't want to participate. Then Peter relented. Jacob had never seen Peter in this state. He was very reluctant to go, but he felt he had no choice. He had to keep an eye on his friend. Maybe Peter would hurt himself. Jacob told Peter that he would go with him. This decision could potentially be disastrous. Peter kept talking about the boy and the bear as they went deeper into the forest. Jacob was thinking that Peter had become completely delusional. He felt the urge to call for help, but something prevented him from doing so. When they finally reached the place where Peter had seen the bear, Jacob noticed something. Jacob noticed tracks in the distance. He was immediately intrigued by what he had found. He had heard of bears in the area, but this was definitely something bigger than normal. In fact, they had found black bear tracks. Jacob began to believe that Peter had at least seen the bear. He still had doubts about the baby. Now that both Jacob and Peter agreed, they knew they had to be careful. The black bear wasn't kidding, and if it had kept a human child with it, who knows what it was capable of doing? Jacob shouted to Peter that he had found more tracks. After following the bear's trail, Jacob suddenly lost track. He had no idea where the bear might have gone. He was completely lost. It could not have vanished into thin air. Peter looked around. He was getting more and more desperate. It couldn't be out of nowhere. They heard a roar. Jacob froze. It was very close. Peter was now sure that they were in bear territory. The bear had probably smelled the two men. They had to be very careful. Peter started to walk toward the noise. Then Jacob pulled him back. Peter looked Jacob straight in the face. He looked truly terrified. Jacob didn't want to go near the bear. He urged Peter to call for backup, but Peter refused. They had all let him down, so why would he trust them now? Jacob really wanted to go back. He had heard the noises in the distance. It was as if the bear was slowly approaching them. Jacob told Peter he would not go with him, but Peter had no intention of turning back. Peter finally convinced Jacob to stay close to him. Two strong men were less likely to be attacked. They both had no equipment with them, so they were not able to sedate the bear when they saw it. Someone had to distract it. Jacob reluctantly followed Peter. Peter was convinced that they were close now. He was already feeling a lot of adrenaline. He had to snatch the boy from the bear. There was no turning back. It was the only thing on his mind. Then Jacob gasped. They saw a cave in the distance. It was certainly no ordinary cave. They followed the bear's tracks and went straight into the cave. It was definitely a bear cave. Peter tried to move forward slowly. Then, suddenly he froze. Peter saw the bear in the distance. He was completely shocked. He knew he had not gone crazy. Even Jacob was now fully convinced and was even more frightened than before. This was totally out of his comfort zone. They shouldn't be there. There was no trace of the child. Jacob tried to convince Peter to go back to the ranger's office to make sure they could help too, but Peter was extremely stubborn. He felt he had to try something, but he still had to locate the boy. Then he heard a noise. Suddenly, they heard cries from the cave. The bear seemed to react and went in. A few moments later, it came out and the crying stopped. Peter now knew for sure that the boy was inside the cave. Then the bear turned its head toward Jacob. Jacob was seen by the bear. The situation was very tense. Jacob did not know how to react. Peter told Jacob to stay still, but Jacob was so scared that he started to walk back. At that moment, the bear reacted and charged rapidly toward Jacob. Peter tried to distract the bear, but it seemed interested only in Jacob, who had no choice but to get away as quickly as possible. It was a life-threatening situation. Jacob ran away as fast as he could. He felt the bear approaching him. The worst happened. Jacob stumbled. He immediately got to his feet and climbed a tree. The bear tried to pull Jacob down from the tree, but it seemed that Jacob managed to get to safety. This was the moment when Peter reacted. Peter was alone. He saw a clear path to the cave. He heard Jacob shouting in the distance, but he felt it was more important to pick up the baby and that Jacob was okay. As he walked slowly toward the cave, he heard Jacob yell that the bear would be back. Peter had no time to waste. He had to get into the cave immediately. Without thinking, he started running toward the cave entrance. He didn't hear the bear nearby, so he knew he had some time to save the baby. When Peter reached the cave, it was pitch black inside. Peter quickly pulled his phone out of his pocket to get some light. He didn't know where to go. Then, suddenly, he heard a noise coming from the bottom of the cave. He started to walk toward it, then saw something that shocked him to his core. Finally, he saw the child. Peter quickly ran to the baby. At first glance, the child seemed unharmed. Peter was relieved and proud, but then he realized that he had to get out of the cave as soon as possible. He had no time to waste. He heard noises in the distance. Peter realized that the bear was returning. He quickly turned off the light as he heard the bear walking into the cave. Peter thought the bear had noticed the baby was gone. Then the baby suddenly began to cry. Peter tried to calm the baby down, but it was too late. Peter noticed that the bear had seen him. Switching on the light, he looked the bear straight in the face. Peter was now cornered and was still holding the baby in his arms. The bear seemed to be very cautious as it approached Peter. Then Peter heard more noises. Suddenly, the bear seemed to fall asleep. Peter realized that the bear had been hit by sedative darts. Then he heard a lot of noises all around him. Without realizing it, other rangers started running into the cave to save Peter. Jacob had called them just before they entered the forest, but they were not finished yet. They still had no idea where the parents of the child were. The police had not reported the boy missing. The rangers took the boy to the nearest hospital with the help of the police. Peter received an apology, but he was determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. Soon, they would find out everything. The boy was checked at the hospital immediately upon arrival. A group of doctors took the boy for an inspection. Peter refused to let the child out of his sight. The police allowed Peter to stay with the child. They also took a DNA sample to identify the child. After many checks, it appeared that the child was healthy. Every hour, Peter checked to see if the lab results were already there. He learned that the bear had also been brought in for inspection. Peter hadn't slept for 24 hours when he finally got the news, but it was not the news he had expected. The bear was left back in the forest, and Peter was happy that the animal was safe. But what would become of the boy? No one was looking for him. Peter felt desperate. His wife also came and urged him to rest. Then the police captain called Peter into an office. They had determined that the bear had kept the child safe. He was well fed and had not been harmed at all. They had also discovered something else. The DNA results had come back. When the police captain told Peter the whole story, he burst into tears. Unfortunately, the boy's parents had been found in the woods. It appeared they had been in a fatal car accident. After the accident, the bear had welcomed the child. They couldn't find any family members either. Peter didn't know what to say. Then he looked at his wife, and they both knew what to do.